Welcome to our third episode of the Masculinity podcast with me, Zac Fine, and Pablo Woolls-Blanco. And this week's episode is about relationships, specifically about being a man and how to go about relationships in a strange time where it's not very clear. A lot of the things around relationships aren't clear. How a man should act, what's expected of a man. We hear a lot about equality, but how far does equality actually get you? And can you expect equality as a man in a relationship with a woman? And just at the outset, it's probably worth saying that I've lost Pablo. We're talking about men and heterosexual men. Not that there's anything wrong with not being a heterosexual man, but that's the focus and the emphasis of this conversation. And I think that it's okay to be able to have a conversation that doesn't include absolutely everyone. It doesn't mean that there's anything, any judgment or anything wrong about people who aren't heterosexual men. It's just that that's the focus of this conversation. So Pablo, I know you've got some burning questions on this stuff. Where do you want this to go today?
Yeah. Sorry, can you see me now?
I can't see you.
You can't see me. I'm fine on my end.
Well, maybe I don't know if that. Maybe it's. I don't know if it's recording.
I think it should be okay. Should we push on?
Oh, you're back. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's push on. Yeah. I mean, look. I think I'm not going to say this will be my favourite week, but relationships, and you're right to point out that this will almost solely be focusing, or not entirely, but sort of on heterosexual relationships for a man. But the reason I say it could be my favourite is because growing up as a young man and then sort of entering sort of the relationship and like world of women has definitely been one of the more like challenging things I've come across. And maybe it's easy to say now because it's been recent for me as like a 21-year-old just. And maybe there were harder things that I've had to grow into as a man too, but definitely like navigating the world of women, like you say, what's expected from a man, how to behave, sort of like the challenges that come with it, I've got to say has maybe, and probably still is today, the most difficult thing I've had to deal with. It just comes with a whole lot of complexities. I mean, I think the first thing I want to get into with you as an opening point is the fact that I think we all agree it's trickier than past generations. I think in the past, I would say the man had more power in relationships. I don't think we've ever been at a point as we are today where the male has had this less amount of power in a relationship. This amount of difficulty where, in my opinion, the woman has so much control and decides so much in terms of what direction the relationship goes. I really feel that the man now is on the complete back foot. He's the one who has to do all the grafting, all the work, and really feels kind of like a disadvantage to the woman who's coming up at quite a high position. And I wanted to get your thoughts really as an opener in terms of where you think man and the woman stand in modern day.
It's a pretty bleak summary, and I hope it's not like that. I'm in a relationship right now that I feel respected and seen and understood in a way that I don't think I've experienced before. But I'm showing up in a different way as well, and I'm communicating in a different way than I ever have in a relationship, which has been a gradual evolution for me. So I guess at the outset, I'm not saying what you just said is inaccurate, but I think we've got to be careful about. I still can't see you, by the way.
Okay.
I think we've got to be careful about talking about ourselves as victims and passive.
Yeah.
players and passive agents. Like, we don't have agency. We do have agency. And I guess one of the themes today should be boundaries, because it's what you tolerate. That's one of the things Jocko Willink talks about. Just be careful what you tolerate in all walks of life, in your work, in your financial arrangements, in your friendships, in your intimate relationships. So if you probably heard of MGTOW, the MGTOW movement, have you?
No, I haven't.
Oh, right. Men who go their own way. So these are men who have sworn off women because they take the view literally that everything you just said is game over. It's already happened. Men are powerless in relationships. That's how they see it. Because, and this is based on observable data. So, well, this is American data, but it's from the book The Boy Crisis by John Gray and William Farrell, that women have more net worth when they die than men do, yet they earn less in their lifetimes. So there's a huge wealth transition going on from men to women all the way through the life cycle. Men get completely shafted in divorce courts, financially and with child access. Men die younger. There's so some of those things you're just saying, they're not made up, but there's not much evidence that women are happier because of the last 40 years or 30 years of women's rights. And I think Douglas Murray said this in one of his books. So The Madness of Crowds, where he says it's almost like there was a legitimate journey of feminism to the destination station of equality, and they got to that in the 80s or 90s, and they sort of ploughed through the end bit of the track and just kind of carried on going. And it's just the new territory is just sort of getting revenge on, or imaginary revenge on men who probably don't have a lot to do with what they're remembering or they're imagining that men did to women before. So what was your exact question again? So you were saying...
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, and this isn't always the case, because I know for a fact there are still, women churning over men, going for men in high positions who are sort of like the guy that everyone wants to be with. That certainly still happens. I'm not saying it's always the guy pushing for the woman, not at all. But I feel now more than ever we're at a point where the man is chasing so much, and I see it around me at school, at university. It's like, it's 9 times out of 10 often it's the guy after the woman, right? The woman is there with a lot of options, and the guy is so desperate and so adamant on getting this one girl, more than I think we've seen before. And like you say, I think that comes down to the man. He should have his own boundaries. He should have almost more self-respect. But I think the power is with the woman more now than it has ever been.
Right, okay. I think in evolutionary psychology, and have you heard the concept of hypergamy? This was developed by Rollo Tomassi in his book The Rational Male, and it just talks about I think he was drawing it from other fields. I don't think he came up with it, but he articulated it in that book, and it's about male and female mating strategies. And what you said is, just now, what I heard is men chase women, but they're having to do more chasing than they have done before at the moment. And I think that the first part's definitely true, because men have the capacity to impregnate. They can have loads of children, but at very little cost in terms of how much time it takes and how much effort it takes. Whereas a woman has to protect her. Well, the theory goes she pays a cost for having a child. That means she has a vested interest in securing the best mate, and so it's natural that in evolutionary terms, at least, that men would chase women, and women control access to sex. So if women control access to sex, well, what do men control access to? Well, they control access to relationships. So there's two strategies. There's one of the men who try and get sex without commitment, and then there's the one of women. I'm just describing the theory. I'm not saying this is like the only way of looking at it, but the strategy of the women is I need to get commitment. I need to secure a relationship. I need to get the guy to marry me before I put out. And so what you're saying is that was already there, but it's been accelerated or accentuated. And the reasons for that, what do you feel are the reasons for that?
I think definitely this, and I think we spoke about this in our first interview, sort of the rise in like this incel community amongst men. I think there are an awful lot of us, as you've said sort of before, disaffected young men sitting in their room watching porn, not going out, not interacting with women, and they're becoming desperate, almost like they would go with any woman just at a click of a fingers.
Yeah.
I think men are now becoming like obsessed. They would do anything for a woman, and I've seen it like firsthand, where it's like good guys, strong, capable people, just like throwing their whole lives over just to try and get with this one girl, and that one girl is just like uninterested. And that's where I come at in terms of this power play, and that's definitely not the case all the time. And there's definitely, I've seen women almost the other way around, really going for the man. But I think certainly those sorts of cases are growing.
I just lost you there, but I got the gist. So,
okay,
yeah, I've had clients who are kind of into gaming, and they've said that in the gaming world, it's very much like that. Like there'll be a bunch of guys chatting or whatever it is, and if there's one girl in that community, she'll just get so much traction with everyone, and everyone will try and impress her and stuff. And it's called simping, isn't it? Simping.
Yes. Yep.
I love that word. I don't know why.
No.
So this stuff, it's probably been going on forever, but why? Yeah, why would it be getting ramped up now? Well, I guess this is what I imagine. I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more in it now. I just, I'm a 39-year-old bloke. I live on my own. I have interactions with people, but I'm not I don't know what it's like to be in school or university or an office really anymore. But I imagine that a lot of my behaviour when I was younger would get me into serious trouble now. And in terms of just being flirty or being a bit cheeky. And probably I think that there's things I regret in terms of my behaviour towards women. Not being very kind, not being very generous, not being, but what my understanding is now is that there's this sort of like underlying threat that if men get it wrong, they could be accused of sexual harassment or sexual abuse. I mean, I certainly know that a lot of men are accused of domestic abuse, and sexual abuse in that context after a relationship with kids breaks down. That's just like standard. It's really common if things go bad and no one can agree. But my understanding is that the sort of casual what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of libeling of a man who you, as a woman, who you don't appreciate his advances, or you want to get him.
No.
These accusations can really cause a lot of. They stick even if they're unproven or even if they're disproved.
Yeah.
So, but that still feels like a slightly different point. You're sort of saying that. Go on.
The modern man is definitely scared. I mean that comes into it, but I think an awful lot of it also. Go on.
Well, that's how. Can we work out what that is? So why is the modern man scared? Because I wasn't scared. I was scared shitless of beautiful women when I was growing. Because I was attracted to them, and it was the fear of rejection.
Yeah,
there's this idea
that's one thing.
We need
that's still
to.
There.
Jordan Peterson has talked about that. If you want to get real about inequality, try being a 14-year-old lad at school, because all the girls have like sexually matured, and if you're a bit of a late bloomer you're just, it's terrifying, isn't it? So that's there. So let's just say that's a sort of that's just nature doing its thing, and people say, don't they, that men are sort of 5 years behind women in terms of maturation process. So through the life cycle, I don't know if they ever meant to catch up, but a 30-year-old man is as mature as a 25-year-old woman. So it goes. So there's the fear from that, but where else is the fear coming from?
I mean, definitely in terms of the accusations of assault is there. Of course, a guy is scared of what happens if he was to do anything with a woman. That's there. But I think the main part of it does come from what we just spoke about. When there's a pretty girl, for example, or what I think a lot of people describe it as now as putting women on a pedestal. I think too many guys do this. Women have become, and I know this has happened in my life, even when I've got a lot of other things going on, achieving a woman. It sounds weird to put it that way, but sort of, getting a girl you're interested in and who could be interested in you in a relationship becomes the most important goal in your life, and everything else can become quite unimportant. It's almost like the ultimate quest, and certainly at the pedestal you put them on, and the sort of the behaviour you can accept through going through that cycle, I think can be quite negative and definitely chips away at your self-esteem.
Okay, so what am I if I don't have a girlfriend? What does it mean about me if I'm not able to find a mate?
Well, it could mean many things. It could mean either you're unattractive. It could mean maybe you don't have good enough chat or talk. You're not interesting enough. You're not physically capable enough. Maybe you don't have enough money or resources to provide. It can mean a whole host of things that a guy probably looks at and thinks, right, what am I doing wrong? And then that's sort of where you get all these guys who go away and they go in the gym and stuff, and then they start attaching to people like Andrew Tate, right? And start ticking all these boxes to try and become the best male possible.
Yeah, so the woman is social proof that I've got what it takes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That and is that? I mean, you can see how that works, can't you? Because if I get to the age of say 30 and I haven't had a relationship, it's going to be much harder for me to.
Yeah.
It's not just in terms of social proof for other people; it's social proof for myself, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like if I've had a few girlfriends, I'll probably get another one. But if I've never had one, and in my mid-30s now. Shit. That's scary.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, but I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think they're already saying that the number of like male virgins is rising, right?
There's I should have looked it up for this episode, but William Costello is a psychologist who did a presentation last summer at the British Psychological Society male section conference. He was showing the demographics of that and saying that a crazy proportion of working age women are going to they want the sort of top 5 or 1 percentile of men, in terms of education, earning, provisioning and earning and looks and whatever. But there's just not enough men going into those like that. So there's going to be a kind of completely huge segments of the population are going to miss each other and never have relationships and never have sex.
Yeah.
It's already kind of happening, isn't it, in Japan, which tends to be a kind of a bit further down the demographic path.
But there's a problem with that in itself, and I think the problem with that is that it means that you've got this. I mean, maybe it's a good thing in some ways, but you've got this whole host of men then who are trying to get into that 5%, either by working out more, by becoming more intelligent, learning a new hobby or a new skill to become more able in conversation, whatever. All these things to make themselves in this top 5% of man. But then I think you've got women who understand I don't need to do any improving. Pretty much as long as I'm me, I'm going to be desirable. Whereas the man is sort of like, I've got so much work to do to get to this level just to be able to have a woman who's like at any range.
It does sound terrifying. I've heard that idea expressed a few times that a woman is desirable in her just in her nature. She's naturally desirable. Yep. I mean, maybe it helps if she looks after herself a bit, but I think on the whole, men don't really give a shit about what a woman wears. I speak for myself. I can't really remember what women were wearing yesterday or whatever. Or I find a woman attractive or I don't. That's about it.
Yeah.
But there's this idea, isn't there, that men need to demonstrate their masculine, their value in the sexual marketplace. They need to prove it by having a decent car or a job or good clothes or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm just getting this sense that you're describing like there's this kind of narrowing gauntlet, like there's a sort of narrowing chink of light that men can kind of see. If I kind of run faster and do enough, I might be able to get it, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly unsafe if you think about every human being has a natural instinct and longing to find a mate and raise a family and give and receive love. But what you're describing is a world in which there's an apartheid. So half the population have access to sex and they control access to sex, and the other half definitely don't unless they jump through hoops or get it right. So huge, unusually exaggerated pressure on the natural selection process, I guess.
Yeah.
So in the context of all that, okay, so I think that's probably quite good. Sort of laying the ground, how it looks. This is the question that we were sitting with about this episode. How should I navigate relationships? Is it actually trickier than it was in the past? I think that marriage was more straightforward before. the 60s and 70s, when women started divorcing their husbands more. And I don't know what the percentage is. Is it 70 or 80% of divorces are filed by women now? And they do very well out of them financially on the whole. So, it used to be, I'll bring the money in and you do the householding. But now it's murkier. It's unclear what the roles are. And so I would say that, there's a lot more work around communicating boundaries and being clear so that resentments don't build up. There's an idea from John Gottman, who's a relationship therapist in the US. He says there's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so the 4 kind of terminal problems that happen in relationships are resentment, contempt, stonewalling, and criticism. And if you let any one of those, if they get to a certain threshold, tipping point, it doesn't matter what you do, the relationship's gone. And he set up a kind of like a fake apartment with viewing, so that the psychologist could just like watch real couples live in the apartment over a weekend, and he could tell with a really scary degree of accuracy which couples were going to make it and which weren't, like 10 years out. It's like really, it's crazy, just by how they were talking to each other. So why do you get resentment? Well, you get resentment when you don't articulate what your boundaries are. So it's what you tolerate, isn't it? So a lot of people, myself included in past relationships, sort of can go into a kind of martyr thing where I'm doing so much stuff, it's not being reciprocated, or there's not enough gratitude, but maybe the other person didn't ask me to do it, or maybe they want something else, but I didn't bother to check in with them. So we have to take responsibility for what we want, what our love language, is this idea of a love language. So what I think of as loving might be, say, making food, but my partner might just want me to talk to her for 2 hours. And I just might not want to do that because I'm drained. And for me, I would really appreciate is just like sitting in silence, reading, like both reading different books. Both of those, there's nothing wrong or right about them, they're just different. But so there's a shitload more work to do around articulating a vision. It was just laid out before, wasn't it? It was like, okay, so as a bloke, I'm going to receive respect and acknowledgement if I can basically be solvent enough to afford to raise a family, and I'll get respect from the community for doing that. In the public sphere, that'll probably give me a little, a sense of well-being and increase my testosterone, even because I'm being acknowledged for doing something that's pro-social. I'm raising a family by going to work every day. And I don't really have to work much else out. But now, there isn't really much that a man... There isn't really a male domain left that gives a man that feeling. It all has to be shared. And I'm not saying that's wrong, it's just... It's complicated, isn't it? It's a lot of opportunities for resentments and miscommunication unless it's mapped out. So, I mean, I was talking to a family law barrister last year, and she, Sarah Phillimore, she was really funny, actually. I mean, she wasn't trying to be funny, but she's quite funny. She was making funny points, and it was quite funny because she was just exasperated with how people can find a partner and then, I mean, I've done this myself in my own life, but find a partner and really make no plans. Like, like not work things out, just kind of just let things happen, and then discover very far down the line that you actually see important things very differently, and there's, you know, but now you've got to work things out because there's kids involved and so on.
Yeah.
She was just saying, like, why can't people just get clear on their expectations and the expectations of their partner? Well, I guess one of the reasons is we might be scared to rock the boat. You know, if like you say, it's really hard to get a girlfriend or find a decent wife. I mean, when's the right time to say, actually, I don't really want to pay for every time we go out for dinner. I don't really want to be the one that always has to pay. It's like, fuck, I can't really afford it.
That's the problem, unfortunately. So I think men often, or have done, come into relationships at a really good place. I've done this. You know, you've got your values in place, you've got a lot of other things going on in your life, but you get the woman you want, right? And all those things just slowly start to drop away. You start to accept things that you shouldn't. You don't want to bring up things, for example, often because, to be fair, if you bring them up, it doesn't go down well. It's sort of like you're expected to just take shit a lot of the time and just like, deal with that. You've got me. You've got what you wanted. Now shut up and be happy. Right. Don't complain if I'm not giving you enough. You know, that's the way it's got to be, and that's not always the case. But it definitely is. I think often also because women know they've got a lot of other options now. I think another problem probably comes, and we've spoken about this before, what a woman still expects in a relationship. Now, what we hear a lot is obviously with the feminist movement, is that a woman expects very different things from a man. Things that I'm fine with, to be honest, things like more emotional understanding, more equality, you know, to allow the woman to do more things, not just I don't want my girlfriend just to sit at home all day. You know, I want my girlfriend to be out, inspired, have her own interests, her own things. I want her to be at an equal playing field to me, really, to be honest. But then I think often, and this often comes from what I find really funny, quite ultra feminists who sort of preach a lot of feminist opinions, but then they expect a very macho man. So, you know, I just find it funny sometimes when I hear the type, not just looks, but personality wise of feminist women, where they're thinking, tall, really ripped, in the gym, confident, dominant, takes care of me, like earns money, and it's like, that's fine that you can want that in a guy, but you are also kind of preaching against all of that sort of stuff at the same time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I'm thinking of two things. One is, have you heard of Kevin Samuels? He died recently, last year maybe. He was, all his stuff's on YouTube. It's really funny. So he was like a kind of male coach, like to how to be I guess like a stud, a successful man. And, but then he started doing loads of videos with women, and specifically black women, because he's a black American guy, and so these women would call in, and he would just kind of ask them. He would get so quickly down to the nub of it, and he would ask them what kind of man they were looking for, and then he would like just explain to them that they don't have enough, like their expectations are too high based on their value in the sexual marketplace, because they might be a single mum who, you know, in their late 30s, which, you know, nothing wrong with that, but you can't expect to necessarily bag a man who's on like $300,000 a year the same age, when he's got access to almost anyone in the sexual marketplace. And then the other one, there's a good Instagram account called the Tin Men. And one of the posts on that just had these clips asking young women how much they wanted their dream partner to earn, and they're just coming out with like $350,000, $200,000. You know, that's what they were saying. And there's some men do earn that much, but it's really hard to earn that much money, and there doesn't seem to be any I don't know, there's some there's something strange going on about the equality. Like equality is obviously it's already enshrined in law. It's been enshrined in law for ages. So it's illegal to discriminate against anyone based on their identity. But that's been settled for a long time. But yet it is true that like I saw this video of this young woman in New York had posted, and she went out on a date with a guy, and the waiter asked if he wanted the onion rings or something, and he said, does it cost extra? And the waiter said yes. So he said, no, I'm all right, thanks.
Yeah.
And this woman made a video afterwards just saying how disgusted she was by this guy for like being cheap. And I get that, if we go back to the hypergamy theory, she's just in a sense, maybe not consciously, she's doing her job as a potential mother. She needs to find a mate who can afford to, just pay for loads of stuff and not care so much about money. But you are expected. It's called in the Boy Crisis book. It's called the 5 Ds. You're expected to do the driving, buy the drinks, buy the dinner, buy the diamonds. Can't remember what the fifth one is. But yeah, it's almost, I don't know if this is the case for you, but in the past it's felt to me like it's expected, so there actually isn't that much relational capital in doing it. If I buy dinner all the time, then we go out for dinner tonight and I buy it again, it's not really noticed. It's just like,
I mean, you definitely feel these days, like as a man, you have to do so much. You have to get it so right. Like I've been in situations where I feel like I'm doing like almost everything like perfect. Like I'm really showing you I've got other things going on. I'm in good shape. I've got other friends, maybe other women who are potentially interested. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. The chat's good. We're flirting enough, like all of that, and it's just like it's still not enough.
Maybe you're not enough of an arsehole there.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, I'm trying to do more, but yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a problem as well, right? So you're doing all those things, but are you enough of an arsehole? Yeah, so how can you win? And I think the way you almost win is you have to say, well, I'm going to be the best version of myself, and then, I think the right girl will like me for that. Yeah. Instead of trying to play up, like you say, be more of an arsehole to get with a girl who then probably isn't right for you if you're having to do that.
That's the thing, because long term, it's not going to be sustainable to if you put on an act, you can probably keep it going for a while, but then you can't do it indefinitely. But much better to have your own, like, what's that? I can't think of the word, but you're almost like producing your own energy. You're sort of self-referencing. So if you're really into your football and you're passionate. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you've got a passion or more than one, that's magnetic to other people, especially other women. Who might be interested in you. So David Dada, who wrote a book called The Way of the Superior Man, he talks about that. Like a man needs to have his mission, and that feeds the sexual polarity between masculine and feminine. And if a man just basically does everything the woman wants him to do and stays at home and like, she just despises him in the end. There isn't enough sexual polarity. She feels like she's a mother to a boy.
Yeah.
So there has to be a tension there. That's so the theory goes. So yeah, I'd say you're on the money with that. It's about having your own life, feeling, having ways of filling yourself up, nourishing you that don't require that other person.
Yeah.
And then choosing to share your life but not because you need to, just because there's something greater that's possible in a team. And my friend David Feldman, he's an American. I say my friend, I've spoken to him a couple of times, but I feel like he's my friend because he's so nice. But he describes that so well, like the aspiration, the vision of a marriage is. He says men get it so wrong often because, and I can totally relate to this. And it's on the video I did with him. He describes it really well. He says what happens to most men is they get into a relationship, then it gets a bit more serious, and maybe they move in together. And then he sort of, time goes on, and he kind of runs out of reasons or excuses not to get married. Usually it's the woman who wants to get married, not always, but and then so he kind of goes along with that idea, and they get married, and he doesn't really. It's not clear to him that there's a epic, like, a order of magnitude transition from being in a relationship to a marriage. A marriage is a foundation. He's religious as well. He's a teaching rabbi, but he says that the institution of marriage is a foundational block that is required, or it is very helpful when you are creating a family, because you're doing that not just because you're in a relationship. It's not, at that point, it's not actually about you. It's about these new people you're bringing into the world, and it's also about your community, because you're in this bigger thing. And a lot of men just kind of don't quite get that. But he says, in his view, women do get it. They're thinking, right, yeah, we're going to be building a family. So this is where they need that solid framework, that scaffolding of, they need to see the man can hold that. And yeah, a part of it is provisioning, isn't it? Part of it is being able to hold everything together, even, which isn't equal. It's different. Maybe it is overall, but it doesn't feel it. Maybe.
Yeah.
So,
but there still should be different roles in a relationship, in my opinion. But maybe they're just trying to be ironed out more in modern society. But I'm still a believer that a man and a woman should do different things in a relationship, and I don't think there's something necessarily wrong with that.
Yeah. And it is, maybe it is seen in a pejorative way, isn't it? Like, unless the man and woman are doing all the same things and sharing everything.
Yeah.
Maybe the woman can feel like being I mean, if a woman and a man have a baby, the woman is essentially, this isn't a very flattering way of putting it, but essentially the woman is incapacitated for a certain amount of time in pregnancy and after childbirth. Yeah. And so she has to be recovering and resting at home, and then she's involved in raising the infant much more intensively with breastfeeding. Yeah. So that's very different to what the man's doing, isn't it? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that,
no. Yeah.
I feel like I'm making a really obvious point there, but it.
Yeah.
So let's try and pull some of these threads together. So,
should we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm just looking at what I had written down. So, have we got to?
Yes.
Have we got to this stuff? I was going to read out a bit of research. Domestic abuse victimization is apparently domestic abuse is apparently gendered, but the data shows that it really isn't. So this is from the US. 52 million women and 50 million men are victims of all domestic violence. So it's pretty much equal, 52 to 50 million. and 41 million women versus 29 million men are victims of severe domestic violence. So substantially more women than men, but a substantial number of men. And intimate partner violence, so kind of emotional abuse. Women are, if you think about it evolutionarily again, women are, if they don't have the brawn, they don't have the strength and the physical strength to get their own way. They resort to more subtle manipulation techniques, and so they can often be really abusive, but just not in a physical way.
Yeah.
So with all of this, how can men hold healthy boundaries? Well, I think it's about it's really tricky. It's really tricky because if you want a relationship so much and you're desperate for it and you feel like I should have one, time's passing and other people have got one and there's not that many opportunities, then it's pretty hard to hold out, I guess. So maybe there's a balance there. So it's getting clear on what your worth is, and I would say building your life. I don't want to come across as subscribing to the Rollo Tomassi rational male philosophy. I think there's some good points in it, but one of the points he says, which I think is relevant here, is your value as a man in a sexual marketplace continues to rise in your 30s, whereas a woman's by their late 20s starts to go down.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with that or not, there is some truth in the idea that if you're a single man with a decent career and that you've built a decent life and you're in your mid-30s, there comes a point where you don't really have to do that much because there's not that many men like that. A lot of men have already got into, making families, or they're in long-term relationships or whatever. So if you take the longer view, maybe read that book. Actually, that might be a good thing to do if you're in this situation. You're in your early 20s and you're not sure where your boundaries should be. Am I giving away too much of myself? Because Rollo Tomassi talks about a guy who he moved his university or college to facilitate a relationship with a woman that didn't work out in the end, and then he's got a lifetime of basically paying the cost of that. That was a miscalculation, but he thought he was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe as a man, if you take a longer view and say, okay, well, I'm going to sort my life out, and the more I do that, the more desirable I'm going to be, and actually I don't need to work much else out. Something will come along because I'm doing that, and if it doesn't, well, my capacity to find a really good wife will keep going up anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's sort of just focusing on yourself. I think is what everyone said. It's quite broad. It's just like becoming the best version of yourself in every aspect, right? Rather than focusing. I think many things in life. If you want a better job, you can. If you want more money, you can work hard towards that. If you want a better mark in your degree, you can work hard towards that. But a relationship is something that you can't really control. I always find, it really comes down to working on yourself. And you mentioned about being desperate or wanting it. I think that's one of the worst places to enter at as well.
Yeah.
Where you're actually not happy being single. I don't actually know if it's possible to go into a healthy relationship if you're not happy being single.
I agree. It's an unhealthy beginning, and that reminds me, I want to include something before we finish, which is non-violent communication. So this is a principle of communicating in 4 steps. and it's so useful and powerful in relationships. And I don't know, it's really interesting actually. We hear a lot about how women are so much better at communicating and being in touch with their emotions and owning their emotions. And I'm not sure, in my personal life experience, it's been mixed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. I don't know how great men are at this either, but a lot of women I know aren't very skilled at communicating how they feel and what they want.
Yeah.
But we can only ever do our side in a relationship, and if you use the principles of nonviolent communication, it's really, really good to get used to doing it. It's a bit counterintuitive, but I'll just go through the 4 steps quickly, but it's really worth looking up. So first step is to say what happened. So you say what happened without interpretation or judgment or blame. So if I'm in a relationship with you, for example, and you forget a date, or you just cancel a date, but at the last minute, I just say, you sent me a message 2 minutes before the date saying you weren't coming.
Yeah.
That's it. Second step is to say how I feel about what happened. I feel upset. I felt upset when you sent me that message. Third step is my needs. What are my needs? What are my human needs around what happened? My need is to feel connected to you, to know what's going on.
Yeah, reassurance.
To feel cared for. And the fourth step is to make a request. So it can be really simple. It doesn't have to actually be to solve. It's not a solution. It's an attempt at reconnecting from my vulnerability to you, to communicate how I felt, what my needs are, and maybe my request could be, would you be willing to talk, to have a chat with me about the way we communicate, or the way we make plans. That's all it is. Very simple, but it just brings a bit more rigor to language, the language that we use, because often we use passive language and we say, you made me feel like shit, but in non-violent communication we never use passive language. So you can't make me feel ignored, so I'm not gonna. I need to use language that's not got any of that blamey stuff in it. I feel upset. I felt upset when this thing happened. So that's that's a really good discipline to get used to doing if you're interested in getting clear on your boundaries and using language to communicate your boundaries in a way that isn't a power struggle and it's not about blaming. Okay. Thank you for another good conversation. Really enjoyed today.
Yeah.
And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Definitely. Take care.
Cheers.